All right, Monsignor, go ahead.
Thank you, Coach. Dear Lord, I ask your blessing on these brave boys as they venture out to battle.
Take off your fucking hats! Sorry, Monsignor.
Yes, as I was saying, oh Lord, we ask not for victory, not for glory, not for fame.
Joe Bob, you piece of shit! Put that woman down! What's she even doing in the locker room? Excuse me, Pontiff.
We ask only for the preservation of our bodies and our minds.
Hey, Delma, did you shoot up those motherfucking drugs like I told you? Oh shit. Sorry again, Father.
Bless also the entire Hunter family.
Bow your fucking heads! Oh, I apologize for that, your holy of holies.
Yeah. The Hunter family who have so unselfishly given us everything we need for victory.
Asshole! Fuckwad! Jizzbag! Oh, sorry again, Padre.
Who are we even yelling at?
Nobody. I just thought we had a rhythm going.
Accept our efforts in the spirit of sportsmanship with thy guidance, thy kingdom, power, and glory forevermore. Amen.
Amen, bitches!
Welcome to Does This Still Work? The podcast that looks at old movies and asks, does this still work? I'm Joe Dixon.
And I'm George, and I'm George Romaka. And today we're discussing North Dallas 40 from 1979 and some historical context. First, podcasty stuff. You can reach us at dtswpod@gmail.com on Facebook or on Twitter. Not Instagram, not WhatsApp, none of those other things.
Not yet.
Joe and I have between us enough bandwidth and brain cells to handle 2 social media networks. Don't ask us to do any more, just please.
Also, to be fair, Twitter may be in the control of a fascist, so we'll see how much longer I'm there.
Yeah. Although, pretty soon, and maybe even now, I'm not sure yet, you can also find the show on YouTube. We'll see how that works.
Indeed.
Please tell your friends about us and leave 5-star ratings everywhere. You can pick what we watch and get extra per episode content by funding us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/DTSWpod. Now, Joe, take us back to 1979.
Super Bowl 13 happened in 1979 with the Pittsburgh Steelers defeating the Dallas Cowboys 35-31. The Steelers became the first team to win the Super Bowl 3 times. While the Dallas Cowboys were losing the Super Bowl that year, the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders were filing a lawsuit. This headline is from the Paris News in Paris, Texas. Go ahead, George.
Dallas Cowboys cheerleader files suit against film. I guess the plural of cheerleader is cheerleader.
I suppose so. The people of Paris, Texas know what they're doing. Anyway, that film was Debbie Does Dallas. The suit was filed in U.S. District Court in New York City, alleging that the star of the film wears a virtually identical uniform to Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. I will quote from the article. The star and other performers are shown in numerous explicit and lewd sexual acts, and the film is advertised as ex-Dallas Cowgirl cheerleader, the complaint added. The synchronized dance and cheerleading group complained that the film was made without its authorization and was being shown at the Pussycat Cinema on Broadway and 48th Street in violation of trademark law. The court was asked to bar distribution or screening of the movie to prevent irreparable harm to the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders and for an unspecified monetary damage award. End of quote. Now, I have no idea what happened to that lawsuit. I can string Debbie Does Dallas today, to say nothing of my having seen it in college in the 80s. I'm going to guess it failed. Here is some trivia for you. Parts of Debbie Does Dallas were filmed at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. If you're thinking of attending Pratt and are visiting the campus, be sure to ask them where they filmed Debbie doing it.
They probably, have renovated those spaces since.
Yeah, at the very least hope they cleaned them out.
By using black lights to remove any material that was there when that was filmed.
George, are you familiar with this film? All of this is very much way before your time.
Given my 30-year history of wanks, I'll say that a non-zero, but statistically insignificant number were 2 scenes from that film.
Ah, okay. Finally, in 1979, the State Fair of Texas and Dallas had an incident. This headline is from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Read it, please, George.
Fare cable cars crash, injuring 13.
That headline to a story about 2 cable cars of a sky ride crashing to the ground is a little off. It should say injuring 13 and killing 1, since that's what happened. I will quote, "A man injured when a cable car crashed to the midway at the State Fair died about 10 p.m. Sunday," a spokesman at Parkland Hospital in Dallas said. He was identified by the hospital as Fred Millard, 41, of Dallas. His wife and 2 daughters, also injured when the car fell, were in serious condition at the hospital. The accident on the closing day of the fair also left dozens of other riders trapped in their cars for more than 3 hours, awaiting rescue from Dallas firemen, who raised snorkels and ladders to those stranded as high as 100 feet in the air. End quote. What a nightmare to be out there with your family and have something like this happen.
Yep.
Okay, George, tell us about North Dallas 40.
All right. This was directed by Ted Kotcheff.
This guy directed some big films like First Blood, which began the Rambo series, and Weekend at Bernie's. His only other movie I've seen is The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, with Richard Dreyfuss in his first starring role.
This is based on a novel written by Peter Gent.
I know you looked him up, George, so you can go into who Peter Gent was, but in terms of his work in cinema, this was pretty much it. I've never read the book.
Yeah, and I'll go into that in the summary. The screenplay was written by Frank Yablans, Ted Kotcheff, and uncredited Nancy Dowd, and it's kind of surprising that anybody with a uterus had anything to do with this movie.
Well, I can see where there was an attempt to try and, we'll get into it. Frank Yablans wrote the screenplay for Mommy Dearest, and I've seen that. Nancy Dowd had a couple of flicks I heard of, but none I've watched.
It didn't win anything worth mentioning. For blurbs, Amazon says, HD. Great, thank you, Amazon, for starting the blurb of the movie with the resolution that the film is being shown at when we rent it. That's really useful information. Nick Nolte plays an aging wide receiver in this bawdy, brutally honest look behind the scenes of pro football. And IMDb says, a satire of American professional football, in which a veteran pass catcher's individuality and refusal to become part of the team family is bitterly resented by his disciplinarian coaches.
Wow, that is not the movie I saw.
Yeah, and between these blurbs, well, I'll get into it later.
I mean, it's the closest to aging receiver and a bawdy, brutally honest look behind the scenes of pro football. It's closer to it than he's going against the conventions of the game and he's individualist. That's not the character I saw.
Well, what my problem with these two is but these don't agree on what this movie is.
No.
Then we have characters. Players. The protagonist, Philip Elliott, wide receiver. Also, wide dispenser of semen, but only with women who consent, which makes him one of the best human males in this movie. So, low bar. Played by Nick Nolte.
The first thing I'm aware I saw Nick Nolte in was a TV movie called Rich Man, Poor Man. From the title, you wouldn't know it, but it was a story about this rich guy and a poor guy and how their lives intersected. I also saw him in 48 Hours, Down and Out in Beverly Hills, New York Stories, The Player, and Tropic Thunder.
Then we have Seth Maxwell, quarterback. While he doesn't seem like he is personally rapey, he has no problem if his teammates are. Played by Mac Davis.
Mac Davis was a former country music star turned actor. So there's 2 professions where I don't know his work. He gets started on a couple of TV shows I've seen.
Then we have Joe Bob Priddy, defensive tackle. A violent, rapey moron with a racist streak. Played by Bo Svensson.
He seems to mostly have TV credits. For movies I've seen him in, that will be 2 Quentin Tarantino pictures, Kill Bill 2 and Inglourious Bastards.
Then O.W. Shattuck, defensive tackle. A gentle-ish giant who could have made a dent in my lifelong view of myself as a straight guy if I didn't remember the other role I remembered the actor from, which Joe is about to say. Played by John Matuzak.
He was Sloth in The Goonies, which we saw for episode 106. He was also a real-life footballer. He played most of his career for the Oakland Raiders until he retired after winning his second Super Bowl in 1981. I can't begin to guess why this guy would have made you reconsider your breeder status, George, but okay.
Hey, he was a large, beautiful man.
It's because of the beard, right?
Probably. He also had really pretty eyes. Then we have Delma Huddle, Wide receiver, he has the sense to avoid major injuries until the peer pressure gets to him. Played by Tommy Raymond.
This is like another guy who played pro ball for a while. He doesn't seem to have that many acting credits, though.
Then we have Monroe, defensive tackle. He's black, and that matters for about half a second, unless you perceive how he's used by his coaches as a way to get the white rapey guy angry. Played by Cliff Frazier.
Another former football guy who did some acting, but not a lot. I did see him in House Party and Barbershop.
Now we have some coaches. Coach Johnson. He is the stereotype of a football coach, antacids and all. Played by Charles Durning.
I could have sworn we'd seen Charles Durning in something before, but I guess not. Maybe I'm thinking of Ned Beatty.
Maybe.
The pictures I have seen him in are V.I. Washarsky, Dick Tracy, and To Be or Not to Be.
The guy had 218 acting credits, so I'm surprised we haven't seen him in anything else too. I'd seen him in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Then we have B.A. Struthers. He's the head coach. I don't know what a stereotypical head coach would be, but this guy is a piece of work. Imagining reducing 40 humans to statistics as if those numbers are all they are worth. Oh, wait, gestures at sports as an industry. Played by G.D. Sprodlin.
Sports industry? The same complaint is aimed at politics.
Mm-hmm.
G.D. Sprodlin was in Rich Man, Poor Man, Book 2. It should have been named Even Richer Man, Even Poorer Man, but nobody asked me. He was also in The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Then we have team management. Conrad Hunter, team owner, thinks that luck is a persistent attribute of a human being. He's also stinking rich. Played by Steve Forrest.
I may have first saw him in an old movie called The Bad and the Beautiful. Maybe it was an episode of the original Star Trek. He was in Mommy Dearest, and I definitely saw that.
I saw him in Spies Like Us with Dan Aykroyd.
You went to the movies with Dan Aykroyd?
I was 4 when that movie came out, so no. And then we have Emmett Hunter, executive, brother of Conrad, and a skosh away from being cucked by Elliott. Played by Dabney Coleman.
This guy takes up a good portion of my life. He was in Towering Inferno, 9 to 5, Tootsie, Amos and Andrew, and I used to watch his show Buffalo Bill.
I've seen him in none of those, but I did see him in Dragnet from 1987 with Tom Hanks and Dan Aykroyd, You've Got Mail from 1998 with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, and Inspector Gadget with Matthew Broderick and neither Tom Hanks nor Dan Aykroyd.
You know what? Oh, I also saw him in Dragnet. I missed that one. Okay.
Then we have women, because they can just be a category in this movie.
Well, you can say that about a lot of films.
True. We have Joanne Rodney. She plans to marry Emmett Hunter, but suspects him to be gay, so she gets her sexy jollies from Elliott. Played by Savannah Smith Boucher.
She's done some TV shows I've watched.
Like Saint Elsewhere.
Yeah.
Then we have Charlotte Calder. I'm not sure, as I write the description, just how she ended up at the party where she meets Elliott and becomes the love interest, but that happens. Played by Dale Haddon.
I'm not sure about a lot of things when it comes to this character. As for the actress, I saw her in Bullets Over Broadway.
Now, I never saw this, but she was in Spermula, described as a notorious secret society known as Spermula plans to return from the future and conquer Earth by neutering the male population. I just thought that was special.
We will not be watching that movie.
Listeners, you can become patrons and make us watch that movie. I just want to point that out.
Don't you dare!
Please do. Oh my fucking God, please do.
If we want to watch this thing and you hate it, it's on you, buddy.
Look, I will take watching a movie I hate for patron dollars. That's fine. Look, there's some part of this movie where they go, we're whores. The football players, that is. They describe themselves as whores. I'm a whore. That's what I discovered about myself during my second attempt at college. So this movie. The plot. One need not be a pro U.S. football athlete to relate to this opening scene. I do enough groaning and such nowadays, and I don't get pummeled on a regular like this guy. We meet our protagonist, Philip Elliott, as he grudgingly wakes up. The entire morning, he'll be having flashbacks to both triumphant and humiliating moments of his career. His pillow is stained with blood. His own. Now, this isn't Hercules, The Legendary Journey, or Sin City. There's nobody in bed with him. The closest thing he'll find to a corpse is his own reflection when he eventually makes it to the bathroom. He groans, moans, creaks, cracks, and stumbles his way through his home, which is littered with beer bottles of various emptiness, which he will use to wash down some pills from the dozens of prescription bottles he's got laying around. When he makes it to the bathroom, he stares at his own face before he uses some tweezers to pull out of his nose what I can only assume is a part of his brain.
I assume that was a tissue stuck up there.
For some background here, this is set in 1969 and is based on a novel written by Peter Gent. Gent was a wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. He started as a rookie in 1964. The year he made the team, he'd also been selected in the NBA 14th round draft and turned down an offer from the Baltimore Bullets. Players had only 1 day off per week, and this movie starts on that day. So it makes sense that he's hurting because he spent the last 6 days getting his ass kicked and has been on that schedule for years. Gent put a lot of his own experience into that novel, which got diluted in the movie. One thing that never gets explained at all is why the hell this movie is titled North Dallas 40. The fictional team Elliott plays for is the North Dallas Bulls, and is modeled on his experience in the Dallas Cowboys. A write-up from ESPN2, linked in the show notes, sheds some light on this. Quoting, "Why North Dallas? Gent, a rookie in 1964, explains in an email interview, I was shocked that in 1964 America, Dallas could have an NFL franchise and the black players could not live near the practice field in North Dallas, which was one of the reasons I titled the book North Dallas 40. I kept asking why the white players put up with their black teammates being forced to live in segregated South Dallas, a long drive to the practice field. The situation was not changed until Mel Renfro filed a fair housing suit in 1969.
Yeah, they really, I don't know if it was originally in the film, they just cut it out, or it was just diluted from the very beginning.
It wasn't even in the book.
Oh.
It's why he titled it that, because North Dallas was segregated from South Dallas.
I understand what you just read, but I'm surprised. I thought that was in the novel at the very least.
It was something that he was concerned about when he was playing football, which that's more than I would have thought, you know, given how zero attention is paid to race in this movie.
I am impressed that a white man noticed discrimination in 1964.
For real. If that idea had made it into this film, it would have been a very different, more important film. As we saw in the blurbs, Amazon seems to think this is a documentary, and IMDb thinks it's satire. Even if the problematic things we'll see and discuss were included to shine the proverbial light on those behaviors, the film doesn't make that intent clear at all.
Oh, disagree up front.
Okay.
You think this film is neutral on this, or that they're celebrating these guys?
I think it's neutral. And I think that neutrality is sort of what centrism is.
I don't think they showed this with the idea, oh, these guys are great. I honestly didn't take it that way.
I don't think it's
neutral.
I don't think it took it as them being great. I think it's neutral in the we'll let the audience decide what they think, which means that the racists are going to come away still racist.
I don't know.
But we'll see.
You can hit people over the head and they still wouldn't necessarily get it. No, I don't think the picture's neutral on that. But anyway, let's continue. Yeah.
So back to Elliott's bathroom. He finally manages to lower himself into a hot bathtub, and he looks the most comfortable that we've seen him so far. Then, at the sliding glass doors to the outside world, Whose home would have sliding glass doors that lead to the outside from within their bathroom with no curtains or shades drawn?
Maybe he likes being seen.
That just seems weird.
Oh, it's totally weird.
Whatever. At those doors appear 3 white guys. 2 are rather hulkish, 1 is normal-sized, and all 3 are armed.
So you know it's Texas.
Yep. But no, this is not a sexual assault about to happen, as it almost certainly would have been in any movie from the 70s if the person in the tub had boobs. It's 3 of Elliott's teammates, his quarterback bestie Seth Maxwell, and defensive linemen Joe Bob Priddy and O.W. Shattuck. All 3 are well on their way to tomorrow's hangovers, and they've come to pick up a reluctant Elliott for their weekly hunting trip. This scene involves a conversation between Elliott and Maxwell, with the quarterback coaching his favorite receiver that he needs to stop fighting the management and just go with the flow if he's ever going to get off the bench. The rest of that scene can be summed up in another quote from that ESPN2 article describing the real situation it was based on. Former Cowboys Ralph Neely, a tackle, and Larry Cole, defensive end, told Washington Post reporter Jane Levy that the trip was real. Football players have only one day off a week, and if they go hunting, they're sure as hell going to shoot something, Cole said in 1979. We shot butterflies, field larks, and, Neely added, a mailbox.
How do you shoot a butterfly?
With a shotgun.
I don't really think you hit that's got to be pretty, especially the way they fly. Good luck with that.
That's why you use a shotgun.
These guys sound like see, even from this, when they first introduced these other characters, first they introduced him bleeding in the bed, then you introduce these other assholes. I don't know you can consider this neutral. They come off as such pricks from the moment you see them.
Unless you're rooting for them.
But what's to root for? At that point, anyway.
They are holding guns. There is a large segment of the U.S. population that sees that as a virtue. Next is a scene that made me want to duck out of this episode because I didn't want to finish watching the movie. I hate describing things like this in any kind of detail and knew that I would have to. The party is crowded. The first thing we see is Joe Bob tossing a big-ass CRT TV into a swimming pool just because. Then someone is talking to Joe Bob and brings him to meet, and I paraquote, last year's Miss Farm Implements from SMU who's almost a virgin. She's dressed like a Playboy bunny.
I've never seen titties like yours. I swear to God, I never have. They're beautiful.
Can I show your titties to my buddy O.W.? Can I? Would you? All right. O.W. O.W. Come over here.
And if you look at that woman's response, she goes along with it, but she's clearly like, oh, you fucking asshole.
Yep. Meanwhile, Maxwell has a gal on each arm.
Hey, did you girls ever try a quarterback sandwich?
Well, sounds good to me.
The saving grace of that moment is that the girls seem into it. There's nothing wrong with sex, casual or not, however many holes, poles, or toys are involved, with one super important caveat. Consent. If these two girls want to squish that guy between them, more power to them. And I'm going to gloss over the scene where the one guy who's seen a gal's boobs starts to fight with a guy who's dancing with her before the combatants pause mid-grapple to kiss each other before they all give up fighting and dance together, because it seems like way too wholesome a conflict resolution for this film. I only bring it up because it sparks the meet cute for Elliott and Charlotte Calder, who seem stressed more for a board meeting than an intoxicant and testosterone-fueled insemination extravaganza.
Who are you and what are you doing here?
Charlotte Calder, and I'm asking myself the same question.
It's nice to know that she's with us on this.
I would imagine the entire audience is asking, yes, why are you there? It's just you're obviously not having fun.
Yeah, good question, Elliott.
And who invited you? Did she just show up on her own? We'll never find out.
We can't dwell on that because the part that made me throw my headphones across the room is coming up. Hooray! Their budding romance, which has more of an enemies to lovers vibe according to Kit, who is an absolute connoisseur of and expert on romance novels, is loudly interrupted by the terrified screams of a blonde woman being lifted over the head of Joe Bob because, as Elliott tells it, he's there to remind everyone that the biggest guys get to make the rules. That woman's date is, unfortunately, small, and a dead ringer for one of the guys from Here Comes Trouble. That poor guy is getting batted around by Joe Bob's enabling teammates, and most of that crowd is just a breath from rolling on the floor laughing. The manhandling causes her dress to come undone because tits make even the most unacceptable scenes bearable. Or, that's what I assume the filmmakers thought.
Just so people know, Kit is your girlfriend.
Yeah. As Charlotte and Elliott wind down from their debate on the morality of what's happening, she decides it's time to go. Unfortunately, Joe Bob spots her and decides to put his hands on her. Not unfortunate for Joe Bob, who suffers no consequences for any of the violent, rapey, horrible behaviors he displays. It's unfortunate because it means Elliott has to actually do something because she's caught his eye too, and it wouldn't do for him to sit back and watch Joe Bob do whatever comes into his damaged ogre mind to do. Joe Bob grabs Charlotte's wrists and makes lame, low-effort passes as she struggles. Elliott places his hands on Joe Bob's arms. Eventually, the behemoth grabs Elliott by the neck, and his rage blinds him to his prey leaving. At this point, Maxwell jumps in and says this to Joe Bob as if that monstrosity would understand the ridiculous context under it.
Hey, man, and just try to keep that little dolly from raping you. Come on, baby.
What follows is a conversation between Maxwell and Elliott so heavy with rape apologetics that I can't even with it anymore, and I am just moving the fuck on from this scene.
Now, if that wasn't the most realistic thing you've ever seen in a picture, I don't know what is. Now, you think conversations like that take place not only just in football or on college campuses?
Oh yeah, no, I am 100% in no doubt that this conversation happens just like that all the fucking time.
Okay.
Elliott leaves the party, shows up at Charlotte's, pulls a beer out of his pocket, and passes out on her couch after she tells him that he's not sleeping there. She puts a blanket over him anyway.
Okay. Let's stop there. That is the last time we see her, and then a whole bunch of stuff happens, and then the next time we see her, and I know you'll get into it. I do not understand from that point to where we later see her, where the relationship happened. Where does someone like, oh, I'm going to date this guy?
Once you cover a sleeping man with a blanket, you're in a relationship. That's just what happens, apparently.
Yes, a man you did not invite to your home who comes over and decides to sleep there. That's real sexy to girls.
Which I did think it was funny. He comes in and she says, would you like anything to drink? And he says, I'll take scotch. And she's like, I have milk. He's like, never mind. And then he pulls a beer out of his pocket.
Yes.
That was mildly amusing.
No, it was. Nothing particularly there is problematic per se.
Other than him raping her house.
Other than him showing up unannounced. Well, she doesn't really know him. And it's a wonder she'd let him in, but okay. She does do that. And then he goes to sleep there, which is not cool, but he doesn't try and force himself on her or anything or do anything gross.
The next morning, Elliott shows up at team headquarters for a meeting with head coach B.A. Strothers. He briefly hobnobs with team owner Conrad Hunter, who drops this little turd of wisdom.
You know, Phil, there's one thing I learned early on in life. It's the most important thing a man can have. What's that, money? Luck. Luck tells me something about a man.
Conrad goes on to say that he himself has more luck than brains, which is something I can agree with.
Well, he's right. Luck does play a huge part in one's life. It also helps to be born into a very wealthy family.
Luck is not an extant thing that people possess. Luck is a phenomenon only identified after something has happened that is fortuitous.
Yes, but you can create your own luck.
No, you can't.
Yes, you can.
If you're creating it, it's not luck.
If you're in the right place at the right time and meeting the right people, which all comes down to really probably more of a class thing than anything else.
Yeah.
Maybe a racial.
Luck is very much an encapsulation of class and racial privilege that occasionally finds its way to people not in the higher classes or non-white people. Elliott finds his coach with Emmett Hunter in Emmett's office. Emmett takes his leave, and this won't be the last time that Elliott will be inside of something that Emmett sees as his. Once they're alone, the coach uses a computer terminal that is as noisy as the systems in Aliens and goes back and forth with Elliott about who's really responsible for Elliott's touchdowns and how Elliott needs to think of the team and stay on the bench when he's told. On the way out, he runs into Emmett, who's with his fiancée, Joanne Rodney. Emmett wants Elliott's input on some recruiting thing that Elliott has zero cares about. Joanne inquires about how Elliott has been, and the scene ends. That scene ends so that Elliott can go over Joanna's place and let her do some off-the-bench receiving. She obviously enjoys her time with him, for reasons that I don't understand, but doesn't really see him as marriage material. She asks him to keep coming over if she marries Emmett Hunter. Elliott's not really jazzed about sleeping with married women, but, you know, it's hard to be mad at someone for wanting to marry up or for still wanting your dick while she's discussing it. Now the team is watching reels of the last game so that the coaches can, ostensibly, help their team understand the tactics and behaviors they can use to be better. I don't think that that's what this coach is accomplishing, even if it's what he's intending.
The scene here, and just what I know of, I've seen in movies that show boot camp, I could never survive in any of those places. I cannot take people yelling at me, and especially in this case, throwing things at me. I would break. I would totally lose my shit.
Yeah, if you can't take people yelling at you, boot camp would have sucked for you. Then there's scrimmage practice in the gymnasium, where we watch Elliott get pounded into the floor with his coach harping on his concentration. I'll hit on that in a little bit.
Now, when you say pound on the floor, you mean actual hitting, not He's not getting any loving.
No, he's getting tackled to the floor by burly men. In the locker room, Joe Bob announces that he's starting a restaurant chain, apropos of nothing, and solicits input. This is Joe Bob, so any input that doesn't include tits won't be good enough. And, for better or worse, Elliott is a smartass. More ass than smart, but when he's up against Joe Bob, that's a meaningless distinction. Joe Bob reacts to whatever Elliott says violently and is held back by two other players, Monroe and Delma Huddle. Those two are black.
It always did take two of you to hold one of me.
It's the only real racism shown in this movie about a football team in North Dallas in the 1960s, and that itself strains my suspension of disbelief. At night, Elliott comes home to find that his home is in the middle of being robbed. It's not really a robbery, but we have absolutely no reason to think that right now.
Yeah, it's really weird. At first I thought, and then I later see they explain it in the film, but when I first see this, I think, oh, they're not going to address that? And I guess they must have edited something out. But why keep it in the picture?
And then the next day, in the locker room infirmary, Elliott and Maxwell joke around and steal a bunch of meds. One of those meds is Dexedrine, an amphetamine central nervous system stimulant used to treat ADHD. From that ESPN2 piece, as for speed pills, Reeves said, nobody thought there was anything wrong with them. A lot of guys took those things 15 years ago, just like women took birth control pills before they knew they were bad.
Huh?
It's not as true a picture as it was 10 to 15 years ago when it was closer to the truth. Now, that remark about birth control sent me down a bit of a rabbit hole.
Really?
My first thought was thalidomide, but that was billed as a safe alternative to barbiturates for anxiety and morning sickness, not a pharmaceutical birth control.
Yeah, I never heard about anything being wrong with birth control pills.
I think he's referring to either Enovid 10, an early hormonal type pill with a tendency to cause strokes and heart attacks.
Ooh, okay.
Or the Dalcon Shield, an early IUD with a tendency to cause blood poisoning that looked like an alien facehugger.
Yes, but that's not a pill.
No. But yeah, in the 60s, there was one of the early hormonal type pills. Those evolved into what is now birth control pills. But back then, like, the dosing was so much higher, and it tended to cause strokes and heart attacks.
I see.
So I think that's what he was talking about.
Okay.
But I want to say fuck you to the head coach for screaming at Elliott about his concentration when the guy is on ADHD medication just because. It's not concentration that's the problem here, dude.
Yeah, but they didn't know what ADHD was back then, and those pills were just to keep the players playing. It wasn't to benefit them beyond getting on the field and getting, hit.
Yeah. So now we're going to talk about the poster for this film, and then we're going to listen to a sound clip. And this right here is enough to say that this film doesn't work because fuck whoever thought this would be funny. So, what's the tagline on this poster, Joe?
Wait till you see the weird part.
All right. Can you identify just visually from this movie what the weird part would have been?
Oh, he was telling about this...
No. Visually. What was weird that you would see? Anything?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't know.
No, so that's misleading in and of itself. All right? Now settle in, because this is 2.25 minutes of audio bullshit.
No, I don't want to hear this.
All-time showstopper.
I don't want to hear it.
You know Jerry Drake?
Drake.
Big Tex Automotive Supply?
Oh, I know that asshole, yeah.
Well, it was his YMCA team me and Hartman had to talk to last night. I give my usual bullshit, football, character development, all that crap. Hartman comes up with a story about Jesus being captain of the football team.
And the apostles each played different positions, right?
And Judas was the coach.
Nope. Judas was the one that sold the playbook to the devil's team.
Oh, my God.
Now, wait till you hear this part. Now, afterwards, Drake invites me and Hartman up to his house for a drink.
Now, I got the wheel, so Hartman's stuck with me, right? Anyway, here's the point. It turns out Drake wants to watch while me and Hartman do nasty things to his bouncy bottom little wife.
Maxwell, really?
Hey, I know. It's not your type of thing. But I happen to be more of a philosopher. I like to mingle with the little people.
What about Hartman?
Well, you know Hartman, Goody Two-Shoes, is fidgeting around like a one-legged cat trying to bury shit on a frozen pond. Until old Seth fixes him a couple of pink poontang specials. You know that crazy tourist drink that I fix for stewardesses? 2 shots out of that, and Hartman is shot to shit. Freaked out. I mean, I never saw a guy having so much fun and crying at the same time.
I don't believe a word of it, but I'm getting horny.
Aha! Now wait till you get to this part. Drake now takes out a bunch of them fake dicks.
Ah, Max, that's gross.
Not gross. Shit, gross is when you go and kiss your grandpa goodnight and he sticks his tongue down your throat. That's gross. Anyway, he's got one, man, that is about 8 inches long, and it's pink, and it's got little crinklies in it. And it's got a grinder that you turn like this, and it goes in and out.
I don't want to hear any of this. I don't want to hear no more of this.
Wait a minute, I'm just getting to the weird part.
The weird part? The weird part?
Yeah, it gets weird.
Okay, who did it?
He did it.
The moral of this story is that if you're going to mention the weird part on your movie poster, that it's not funny to have that part of a conversation interrupted and never finished. I'd linger on that some more, but I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't know why that would be such a big hang-up for you. Yeah, I have no problem with that being there.
I don't like being teased by movie posters.
What do you like being teased by?
Find out in the poster. No. I don't really like being teased, now that I think about it.
Included by big, hairy men with big beards and nice blue eyes?
No, I don't want to be teased by one. After the doc feebly and toothlessly threatens Elliott and Maxwell with repercussions for their medicinal misbehavior, they spend some conversational time together in the locker room and sauna so that Elliott can foreshadow about getting tired of having his body broken on the altar of teamwork. Now again, for reasons we cannot understand, where Elliott goes home to is Charlotte's place because they're in what is actually a mostly non-toxic relationship. How did they get from him falling asleep in her home against her wishes to them sleeping in the same bed and her being genuinely concerned about him? Fuck us. That's how.
It really is quite jarring if you think about it. Because the last time we see her is this asshole's falling asleep in her house. And that's it. There's no reason to believe there's going to be a relationship after that.
Now the team is in a classroom, with Coach shouting percentages and statistics at them as if that's actually a motivational tool.
Oh, is that the one where, I thought that was earlier. Is this when he actually throws the eraser at the guy for nodding off and sleeping?
The eraser was during the film review thing. Okay. This was the one with the poem.
Oh. And they're all snickering at his dumb poem, yeah. And rightly so, what an idiot.
Then it's practice out on the field. There's a conversation on the bench between the owner and his brother and some other evil cult leader looking guy about how owning 44 people is just the best. Other than that, it looks like a football practice, except for the racism.
And before you get into the racism, I'm glad you pointed that out. There is something very master-slave about that whole scene of all these rich fucks sitting up there looking at the... Granted, most of the team appears to be white, but nonetheless, it's just very creepy as they're supposedly admiring them in quotes and talking about how they're going to make them all this money and they're very wealthy and hey, money isn't everything. Just, oh my God, they were awful, awful people.
So that racism is how Coach Johnson uses Monroe to get Joe Bob worked up into a near homicidal frenzy. We also get a hint in there of how the coaches are going to pressure Delma into shooting his knees with painkillers, which makes him more effective, but ups his risks of seriously injuring himself.
Is that here where they get into the fight?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the coach is just standing there, and and the owners, everyone's just thrilled by it. It's like, these are your employees. This is a job, and this is how you treat it. Like, oh, we're very happy when they start fighting with each other because it gets them really going, get the blood pumped and all that stuff. Like, what a toxic masculinity bullshit.
We go to a trailer out in the middle of nowhere where Elliott is showing Charlotte the layout for the future dream home he wants to build. They do have a pretty good relationship in this film. I was expecting more of a sitcom-ish slob versus princess story, but they seem to listen and communicate well, with plenty of affection. Oh, that is, until Charlotte dares question the sanity of breaking one's body on the rack to enrich some brainless but lucky buffoon. Them's fighting words, and he ends up throwing a pot and screaming at her. The fight doesn't last terribly long, and he does, in a way, manage to expressly create a boundary when he says, drop it.
Now, how much did you relate to that scene?
I've had my angry moments. I've had my rage moments. I've done some things I'm not proud of. So, I can't fault their relationship too much. And he doesn't strike out at her at all.
No.
He throws a pot at the stove. Like, he doesn't even throw it at a part of a wall that can break. He throws it at something that's fairly sturdy. Like, it's not the absolute worst. Which makes him one of the better people in the film. Which, I mean, he's based on the author, so...
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. So
yeah.
a little bias there.
Yep. And a lot of people think that. Like, in that ESPN 2-piece, a lot of the former players are like, yeah, he thinks a little too highly of himself. He didn't have, like, magic fingers or anything like that. Now we go to the locker room before the big game against Chicago. This scene lasts 12 or so minutes, and I'll hit the highlights. Lots of testosterone and adrenaline make the players hit Coke machines. Joe, Bob, and Monroe make up. Lots of pep talks, lots of individual weird rituals, and finally, a prayer by a Monsignor that asks the deity to protect the team from harm, but does not include asking for divine favor to give them victory. It's the most reasonable prayer I could expect in a locker room.
The weird thing is that he seems to be saying that, please help our bodies, the team's bodies, but it's up to them to really win.
Yeah, which... Okay.
Well, quite literally, it is up to them to win, but it's just weird he put it in a prayer.
Yeah, but I mean, how often do you, like in every sports movie, if you see a prayer, it's like, and Lord, let us stomp them into the dust, right? Like, and every, army that has ever marched against another army is all praying to their own and sometimes even the same friggin' God for victory against the other army. This isn't that. He's just like, yeah, don't let him get hurt too bad. And you know what? The deity can't even keep with that. Can't even pull that off, and we'll get to that in a second.
But I do want to point out something here that I appreciated, that not only just in that scene, but previous scenes we've had where even at that horrible pool party where they're throwing the TV into the water, if you remember, Elliott is invited by this couple to go back to their church. She wanted to do a prayer reading. They're going to read scripture or something.
That was Hartman. The guy that ended
right, Hartman. Okay.
That was him and his wife.
Right. Now, what I liked about it, also, even when they had that meeting with the bosses and he was on his computer screen, he also brings up Jesus and stuff. I appreciate that in this movie because that is one thing you don't see, at least in modern sports movies, at least the ones I've seen, the whole God bullshit, which is still there. That is all very much true then, and it's certainly true now. So I appreciate that it's in the film because I've seen enough sports movies that's really, the whole God thing is seldom there.
You appreciate the truth of that.
Yes.
Yeah. The truth of the existence of that.
Yeah, the acknowledgement.
So then it's the game. At the very earliest start of the game, we see Elliott getting bumped to the bench so that Delma can start after Delma gave in and shot up his knee. Then we jump to Charlotte, who turns the game on in the last 2 minutes of the last quarter, making me grateful to this fucking movie for not making me watch the entire game. Delma's knee gives out badly, like surgery badly. See? Deity didn't do shit. And Elliott is brought in. They need a touchdown with the extra point to tie the game, to go into OT and have a chance of winning. Stuff happens, balls are thrown, and Elliott makes a great catch in the end zone with Charlotte watching proudly via TV. Spirits are high. Then, their kick team fucks up the extra point and they lose. What, did you think this was Friday Night Lights or something? And no, Joe, I haven't seen that, but I doubt the protagonist team loses.
Well, that's another thing I want to point out in this film's favor, is that and I noticed this as I was watching this, in the 70s, people lost sporting events. They lose in Bad News Bears, they lose in this movie, Rocky loses, but when it gets to the 80s and 90s, sports teams in the movies always seem to win. It's weird. It's like they took some sort of analysis of what audiences is like, and it turns out audiences don't like it when the hero of the movie loses, so now they got to be winners every single time.
Mm-hmm. When statistically, half of all the teams lose.
There was nobody who has played sports in their life who hasn't lost the game. It's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Professionally or amateur, you've lost at least one game. You never won every game you've played. It's impossible. So I do want to ask you this. Do you find that what I'm talking about in terms of pitchers where they seem to win more now? I mean, I don't know how many films of the 70s you've seen, but I've certainly seen them. And like, where if there's a sporting team movie, it ends where the scene in this movie, you see with this cheering and they're all happy and everything. That's where the film usually ends, as opposed to this picture where it keeps going.
I don't watch sports movies. as a general rule because I don't like them. I don't like sports. I'm not a sports fan. I've never been good at it. Maybe that's why. So I don't watch them. We do have a weird sort of media culture now where we are seeing a lot more dark anti-hero or even the bad guy winning in the end movies. It'd be interesting to see if that seeps back into the sports genre.
I think the bad guy winning still seems to be mostly in TV shows on like Showtime or something, or HBO. I don't know in broadcast television how many shows are like that. I mean, maybe they are. Honestly, I'm not an expert, so I don't watch that much broadcast TV, but it doesn't seem to me that that is the case. It's still the good guy is good in most of these shows.
Well, we don't cover broadcast TV on this podcast, so I'm going to keep going.
But you are, listener, you are welcome to write in and correct me or defend what I said.
Yes. In the locker room, OW gives Coach Johnson what for about how they're being used as a slot machine by management. Elliott flies back to tell Charlotte that she had every right to question his decision to keep playing. Again, it's more of an ethical moment than I would have expected. He has a meeting with the owner coming up, so he goes to that. In the office of Conrad Hunter, Elliott is faced down by his coaches, Conrad and Emmett. After some hemming and hawing, they bring in a detective, a cop who does PI work for the team in his spare time. That cop was the one robbing Elliott's place in an illegal and invasive search. That cop finds Elliott used and possessed weed, and basically, he's fired. Or he quits. I can't care enough to remember which.
And for those who might be curious, if you haven't seen the film, it's been hinted at that he's being followed, because in the scene at the party, there is a man watching him, and he sees a guy watching him, but then the guy disappears, so he's like, he lets it go, and I guess I know as an audience member, I also thought, I don't know what that was about. I thought it was like a reporter or something.
Outside, Elliott finds Maxwell waiting for him. The former receiver assures that the quarterback is not in any trouble. They wish each other well. As Elliott walks back to his car, Maxwell throws him the ball. Elliott intentionally fails to catch it, like he's saying, "Fuck this movie," just like I am. The end.
All right. I think I know, but George, do you think this still works?
No. Nah. So here's what I'm going to say. I don't know sports movies well enough to know if this works as a sports movie or not. I do appreciate the temporal truth of it in that it's trying to show maybe some of the dirty underbelly of professional sports from that era. It's not that era anymore. They lost that game, but it wasn't because Joe Bob was abusing women. In fact, Maxwell defends Joe Bob's abusing women as he needs Joe Bob to feel like a man, to feel powerful, to feel strong. So he's going to let Joe Bob do whatever he's going to do. And it just doesn't work. I don't know that that's indicting the practice. Mostly, I just didn't like the movie. I didn't enjoy it. I was surprised by the quality of the primary romantic relationship, but it wasn't enough for me to say, like, this movie works.
Okay, finally, after a couple episodes of constantly being in agreement, we finally have a split decision. I think this film completely works. Is it a film I would probably see again? Not really, but it's really not my type of movie. Like you, I'm not really into sports, and I'm not into sports movies, but I have seen them. And I think in terms of sports films, this thing 100% works. Yes, some of it's dated, no question about that. But the more important elements of it, yeah, they could do more with the racism, but I think the misogyny, the use of the players as a piece of meat, the fact that this guy has aches and pains, which is also missing from a lot of films, you notice, as we both know, especially action adventure, where guys are jumping over walls, they're flying through the air, and yet no one pops a muscle, no one's ever in pain. It's ridiculous. And it's good that this film has that in there. I mean, they didn't know about, was it CTE? Is that what it's called? With the brain injury stuff? They don't have that in the film because I guess they didn't know about it back then. But everything else about it, the aches and the pains and the bleeding from the nose, the constantly eating pills or something to make yourself feel better, the drinking, all I think speaks true to life. And I think that makes the film still work.
All right. And you're entitled to your opinion.
And you're entitled to be wrong. So let's move on. George, what's up next?
Our next episode won't be next week, as this month is one of those 5-week months where we don't publish one on the last week. The next episode will drop on Wednesday, November 2nd for the general public and Tuesday, November 1st for patrons, and we will be talking about Easy Rider from 1969.
And what do you know about this film?
Nothing. I know it involves a motorcycle.
Very good, yes. And it'll be interesting to see what you think of that. I have seen it, and I've seen it more than once, but I will leave it at that. So I guess that's it for this episode. I'm Joe Dixon. Thanks for listening, and vote blue.
And I'm George Romacka. Thanks for listening indeed, because if a podcast drops and there's no one around to hear it, it's just another collection of ones and zeros that doesn't matter.
Oh, shit! You never give us anything to bring in the game except your fucking facts and tendencies. To you, it's just a business. But to us, it's still got to be a sport.
You're supposed to be a professional. You go out there and you play football.
Shit, we'll work harder than anybody to win. But man, when we're dead tired in the fourth quarter, winning's got to mean more than just money.
You're hired to do a job.
Job! I don't want no fucking job. I want to play football, you asshole. I want some feeling. I want some fucking team spirit.
This ain't no high school. You don't have to love each other to play.
It's just what I mean, you bastard. Every time I called a game, you called a business. And every time I called a business, you called a game. You and BA and all the rest of you coaches are chicken shit cocksuckers. No feeling for the game at all, man. You'll win, but it'll just be numbers on a scoreboard. Numbers, that's all you care about. Fuck, man, that's not enough for me.
I don't have to listen to
Oh, yes, you fucking do. You gotta listen to me for once. All you coaches are chicken shit cocksuckers. You're all chicken shit cocksuckers. God damn you. Far out.
You've been listening to Does This Still Work? Produced by Joe Dixon and George Romacka, who can be reached by the contact page at dtswpod.com. Be good to yourself and others, because that still works.